It's 6 a.m. on a crisp October morning. I'm standing on my dock, steam rising from my coffee mug, watching my late wife's lovingly restored 1987 Chris-Craft bob gently in our private cove. The scent of lake minerals blends with the sharp autumn air that makes you feel grateful just to be alive. Then I hear it, the crunch of expensive Italian gravel behind me, the click of high-end heels on my weathered dock planks. I turn around, and there she is, Bitsy Caldwell, our HOA president, flanked by two clipboard-wielding men who look like they'd rather be anywhere else. "This eyesore violates our waterfront aesthetics covenant," she announces, her voice cutting through the morning stillness like a buzzsaw. "You have 48 hours to remove it or face daily fines starting at $500. What would you do if some HOA Karen tried to steal your dead wife's boat from your own property? Drop your answer below. And before we dive in, where are you watching from? I love seeing how many states deal with HOA nightmares like this one. Let me back up and introduce myself. My name is Marcus Mitch Thornfield. I'm 67 years old, a retired environmental lawyer who thought he'd seen every kind of bully in the book. Boy, was I wrong. My wife Maggie died 3 years ago after a brutal battle with cancer. She was a union electrician, tough as nails, hands like leather, but gentle as a lamb with me. For 30 years, she spent evenings and weekends in our garage, restoring that Chris-Craft piece by piece. During chemo, when she was too weak to work, she'd sit there just running her fingers over the hull she'd sanded smooth as silk. That boat wasn't just a hobby. It was her therapy, her pride, her way of fighting cancer, even when cancer was beating her. We bought our lakefront property back in 1987 for $35,000. Can you believe that? These days, it's worth over $800,000 thanks to all the gentrification happening around here. But Maggie and I, we never cared about the money. We just wanted our little slice of heaven where we could watch the sunrise over the water and listen to the loons calling at night. The musty smell of Maggie's old work gloves still lingers in our garage. I can't bring myself to move them. Now, let me tell you about the Willowbrick Estates HOA. It didn't even exist until 5 years ago, when luxury developers bought up the surrounding land and decided they needed to force community standards on those of us who'd been here for decades. Enter Bitsy Caldwell. 4 to 5 years old, trophy wife, driving a white Tesla Model X that probably costs more than most people make in a year. She fancies herself the neighborhood curator, whatever that means. Her husband, Brad, owns Caldwell and Associates, a fancy tax law firm. They moved here from California, paid $1.2 million for their McMansion, and immediately decided the rest of us weren't living up to their standards. The HOA weaponizes these waterfront aesthetic rules against us older residents, trying to force us to sell out to their developer friends. Here's where things get nasty. Bitsy showed up that morning claiming my boat dock violated setback requirements. Complete garbage. My dock was grandfathered in from 1987, but she had this survey showing my property line 15 feet inland from where it actually is. Turns out the HOA hired Bitsy's brother-in-law's surveying company to do the work. Conflict of interest much? She threatened to put a lien on my house if I didn't move Maggie's boat to some approved marina storage. The way she said storage made it sound like a junkyard. Over my dead body. I requested an HOA meeting to dispute their bogus findings. You know when Bitsy scheduled it? 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, right when most of us retirees have our medical appointments. Convenient, right? Only 4 out of 23 HOA members showed up. But Bitsy declared quorum met and voted 3-1 against me. That's when it hit me like a slap in the face. This wasn't about property standards or lake aesthetics. This was coordinated harassment designed to force me off my land. They figured the grieving widower would be an easy target. The taste of my coffee had gone bitter and cold while I listened to their trumped-up charges, but my resolve was heating up fast. See, they made one crucial mistake. They assumed that because I was old, alone, and grieving, I'd just roll over and let them steal everything Maggie and I had built together. They had no idea what they'd just started. 2 days later, I'm coming back from the grocery store with a trunk full of Maggie's favorite ice cream, mint chocolate chip. Don't ask me why. I still buy it when I see it. 7 violation notices zip-tied to my mailbox like some kind of Christmas from hell. The plastic zip ties bit into the cold metal as I ripped them off, my hands shaking with rage more than the October chill. Each notice cited a different infraction. My boat trailer was supposedly visible from the street. It's behind my garage. My deck stain was apparently the wrong color. It's the same weathered gray it's been for 15 years. And get this, I had excessive garden gnomes. 3. My neighbor Isle has a whole army of ceramic deer. But apparently, gnomes are where Bitsy draws her aesthetic line in the sand. Total fines, $3,500. Due in 10 days, or they'd file a property lien. Signed by the compliance officer who was actually Bitsy's teenage nephew, taking iPhone photos like he was some kind of professional inspector. Now, here's where most people would panic. Maybe call a lawyer, definitely lose some sleep. But remember, I spent 40 years as an environmental lawyer. I know how to research, and I know how to fight. First stop, the county courthouse. If you've never been in a courthouse basement archive, picture your grandmother's attic. If your grandmother was a meticulous hoarder with a thing for manila folders. I pulled my original property deed and all the plat maps from 1987, spreading them across those metal tables that make everything echo. And that's when I found it. My lot extends 50 feet further into the lake than their bogus survey claimed. But wait, it gets better. The HOA's been selling exclusive fishing rights to members for $500 a year. Guess where their precious fishing spot is? That's right, on my property. But the real kicker was buried in my deed. Mineral and water rights included. Something Maggie never mentioned. Probably because she was too humble to brag about it. While I'm sitting there piecing this together, Agnes, the elderly courthouse clerk, recognizes the property description. "Oh, honey," she says, adjusting her bifocals. "That's the old Patterson spread. Your wife bought water rights to the whole Northern Cove back in '89. My heart stopped. Maggie bought what now? I raced to the bank with shaking hands, fumbling for the safety deposit box key I'd forgotten about. Inside, behind Maggie's purple heart and our marriage certificate, was a folder labeled Lake Surprise for Mitch in her careful electrician's handwriting. Inside was a water rights certificate for 12 acres, including every inch of the HOA's prize fishing area, plus a handwritten note that made me cry right there in the bank vault. "Mitch, if anyone ever tries to push you around about the lake, show them this. I made sure you'd never have to leave our home. Love always, M." I sat in that bank parking lot for 20 minutes, crying harder than I had since her funeral. Not just from grief, but from guilt. Here I'd been feeling sorry for myself, thinking Maggie left me defenseless against these bullies. Instead, she'd been 3 steps ahead, protecting me even from the grave. The weight of that safety deposit box key in my palm felt heavier than gold. But as I drove home, my tears dried up and something else took their place. Pure, focused anger. These people thought they could intimidate a grieving widower with fake surveys and trumped-up violations. They thought they could steal my home, my memories, everything Maggie had worked for. They were about to learn that messing with Marcus Thornfield was the biggest mistake of their entitled little lives. Here's your first knowledge nugget. Always pull your original property deed when facing HOA disputes. They often contain rights that supersede any covenant. The county courthouse has records that can't be faked or manipulated by HOA boards. I went home and made myself a proper dinner for the first time in weeks. Pot roast, the way Maggie liked it. Because tomorrow, I was going to war. I should have known they wouldn't take my silence lying down. 3 days later, I woke up to the sound every boat owner dreads, water where water shouldn't be. The Chris Craft was listing dangerously to starboard. When I hurried outside in my pajamas and rubber boots, I found the problem. Someone had punctured the hull near the waterline with what looked like a screwdriver or ice pick. The cold lake water seeping through that puncture felt like ice daggers against my ankles, but the rage burning in my chest kept me warm. Lucky for me, Maggie's paranoia about neighborhood kids had led me to install a security camera after the first round of harassment. The footage was grainy, but clear enough, a figure in a dark hoodie at 3 a.m., creeping around my dock like some kind of coward. Before I could even get the boat hauled out, guess what showed up in my mailbox? A concerned neighbor letter arrived in my mailbox from the HOA, suggesting that my damaged watercraft now posed an environmental hazard to the pristine lake ecosystem. How thoughtful. Bitsy even offered to help by connecting me with a salvage company for free disposal of my derelict vessel. What a coincidence. The salvage company was owned by one of Brad's tax clients. Here's where being married to a union electrician for 35 years really pays off. Maggie taught me to fix things myself, always saying, the best way to honor good craftsmanship is to learn it yourself. I hired a marine surveyor to document the sabotage. Criminal charges were definitely possible. But I decided to repair the boat myself, using Maggie's tools. You know what? I actually enjoyed it. There's something deeply satisfying about the sweet smell of marine epoxy hardening, the precise work of cutting and fitting a patch, the solid click of a ratchet wrench tightening bolts. Maggie always said, working with your hands clears your head. And she was right. While I worked, I planned. I also installed professional-grade night vision cameras around my entire property. If they wanted to play games in the dark, I'd make sure I had front-row seats. But here's the real counterpunch. I called my old law school roommate, Sarah, who's now an environmental attorney in the state capitol. Mitch, she said after I explained everything, if you own water rights, the HOA can't regulate your lake activities. Period. We dug deeper and discovered something beautiful. The HOA never filed proper easement paperwork for their fishing access. For 5 years, they've been charging members to fish on my property without my permission. That's not just trespassing. Sarah suggested what she called the nuclear option, a cease and desist letter demanding $50,000 in back rental fees for unauthorized lake use, plus interest. Meanwhile, the crackle of my police radio app in the background had become oddly comforting. Officer Martinez was filing my vandalism report and mentioned this was the 4th similar call from the Willowbrook area this month. Apparently, I wasn't the only one being targeted. That's when Earl knocked on my door. Earl's a Korean War vet who lives 3 lots down, and he'd been watching my property while I was at the courthouse. Turns out he was getting the same treatment. They tried to force him to remove his flagpole and repaint his house in approved colors. Mitch, he said, settling into Maggie's old kitchen chair with a grunt, I've been tracking this. 8 of us original residents have faced similar harassment over the past 6 months. This isn't random, it's coordinated. Al had been taking notes. Bless his military heart. We spread his documentation across my kitchen table, and the pattern was clear as day. Every targeted homeowner was elderly. Every property was prime lakefront. And every harassment campaign escalated right before a luxury development proposal appeared before the county planning board. We decided to form an informal alliance, sharing security footage and legal research. Al offered to help guard my property, and I promised to share whatever I learned about fighting these bureaucratic bullies. His knowledge nugget number 2, document harassment patterns across multiple properties. It transforms isolated complaints into evidence of systematic discrimination. Age-based harassment violates federal housing laws. That night, I sat on my newly repaired boat, listening to the gentle lap of water against the hull Maggie had restored with such love. The night vision cameras blinked their silent watch, and I felt Maggie's presence like a warm hand on my shoulder. They'd escalated from paperwork to sabotage. Time for me to escalate from defense to offense. If you think Bitsy was done after the boat's sabotage backfired, you don't know entitled California transplants very well. 2 weeks later, she launched what I can only describe as a social media blitzkrieg. The Willowbrook Community Standards Facebook group popped up overnight, complete with professional photos of my property that made it look like a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Bitsy claimed my boat was abandoned and posed a safety risk to children. Never mind that the nearest kid lives 2 miles away and my boat was in better shape than most cars on the road. She recruited newer residents who didn't know the neighborhood history, painting herself as some kind of environmental crusader protecting our pristine lake from dangerous boat owners. The fake petition demanding the county force derelict watercraft removal gathered 63 signatures in just 3 days. The harsh glare of my phone screen, reading those nasty comments, left a metallic taste of anger in my mouth. But I'm no helpless grandpa crying over keyboard warriors. Sarah helped me draft what she called an educational social media response. We posted copies of my original property deeds, water rights certificates, and detailed evidence of HOA trespassing. Then came the kicker. I revealed that the HOA had collected $15,000 in fishing fees over 5 years for access to my private property. The comment section exploded. Suddenly, those same neighbors were asking very pointed questions about where their fishing fees had actually gone. But here's the mini twist that changed everything. While organizing Maggie's papers for the social media battle, I found her correspondence with a state environmental agency. Turns out my late wife had been playing a much longer game than I realized. Maggie had filed reports about illegal septic runoff from the new McMansions, complete with water quality tests and photographs. Her evidence showed contamination started exactly when the luxury development began. And there was an active state investigation pending when she died. My wife wasn't just protecting our property, she was building an environmental protection case that could shut down the entire development. The soft whisper of turning pages in Maggie's research files was like hearing her voice again, methodical and thorough as always. Every sample was dated, every photograph labeled, every government contact documented with military precision. Meanwhile, Bits's desperation was starting to show. She offered me $50,000 cash to settle the dispute quietly and deed my water rights to the HOA. When I politely declined, she threatened to report my boat repair work as unpermitted construction. Then Brad called with what he probably thought were clever legal threats about my capacity as an elderly property owner. The implication was clear. They tried to have me declared mentally incompetent if I didn't play ball. Big mistake. You don't threaten a retired lawyer's mental capacity without consequences. I started making calls. Jake, who owns the marina downtown, confirmed he'd been getting similar HOA harassment about boat owners' rights. Dr. Chen, president of the Lake Conservation Group, offered free water quality testing to follow up on Maggie's work. Even the county commissioner's office was receiving complaints about HOA overreach. My little property dispute was turning into something much bigger, a community-wide resistance to gentrification by bully tactics. Here's knowledge nugget number 3. Environmental violations often trump property covenants in court because federal law supersedes local agreements. If you can prove pollution or illegal dumping, HOA rules become irrelevant. The distant sound of construction equipment from the new developments had become a constant reminder of what we were really fighting. This wasn't about boat aesthetics or property values. It was about whether working-class families who'd built this community over decades would be driven out by wealthy newcomers who wanted to turn our neighborhood into their private resort. But they'd made one crucial miscalculation. They assumed Maggie was just some blue-collar gal who got lucky buying lakefront property. They had no idea she'd spent 3 years methodically documenting their environmental crimes, building a case that could destroy them. And they definitely didn't know her widower had 40 years of legal experience and nothing left to lose. I spent that evening on my dock, watching the sunset paint the water golden red, thinking about Maggie's strategic mind. She'd always been 3 moves ahead at chess, and apparently, she'd been 3 moves ahead in protecting our home too. Tomorrow, I'd start playing her endgame. While digitizing Maggie's environmental research, because apparently, my wife was more thorough than the EPA, I stumbled across her communications with the State Department of Natural Resources. What I found made my coffee cup freeze halfway to my lips. Maggie had documented illegal dock expansions by 6 HOA board members, all extending beyond their property lines into state waters. Every single one was built without permits, some jutting 30 feet past the legal setback. But here's the beautiful irony. Bits's own dock violated setback rules by 30 feet and was built completely without permits. The woman who'd been harassing me about waterfront aesthetic standards was the biggest violator. But wait, it gets better. Maggie's photograph showed board members dumping waste directly into the lake during their precious fishing tournaments. Grey water, black water, motor oil, everything that's supposed to go to a pump-out station was flowing straight into our drinking water supply. I called Sarah immediately. "You need to see this," I said, my voice shaking with excitement rather than grief for the first time in months. Sarah brought along her forensic accountant friend to review the HOA's financial records, public documents that HOA boards hate when people actually read them. What they found was pure gold. Brad Caldwell's law firm had received $75,000 in legal consulting fees from the HOA in the past year alone. The same firm just happened to represent Lakeshore Luxury Resorts, the development company trying to buy up all the lakefront properties. Do the math. The HOA harassment campaign wasn't some petty neighborhood dispute. It was a paid operation funded by developers who wanted us gone. Meanwhile, Dr. Chen's water testing confirmed Maggie's worst fears. The contamination had worsened dramatically in the past 3 years, with phosphorus levels creating algae blooms that were slowly choking the lake to death. New septic systems from the luxury development were leaking directly into the groundwater. Mitch, Sarah explained over speakerphone while I stared at Maggie's evidence spread across my kitchen table, your wife documented federal Clean Water Act violations. Individual fines range from $10,000 to $50,000 per violation, and criminal charges are possible for knowing contamination. The strategic shift hit me like lightning. I wasn't just a grieving widower defending his property anymore. I was an environmental whistleblower sitting on evidence that could destroy the people tormenting my neighbors and me. Maggie's final gift wasn't just protecting my water rights. She'd handed me the nuclear option. Sarah's voice got that excited edge lawyers get when they smell blood in the water. Environmental David versus Goliath stories are media catnip, especially when they involve elderly widowers taking on corrupt developers. And federal environmental law trumps every HOA covenant ever written. I looked out at my lake, Maggie's lake, our lake, and watched a family of ducks paddle past Bits's illegal dock. The irony was so perfect it was almost funny. She'd spent months trying to force me off the water for aesthetic violations while she was literally poisoning it with sewage. Here's the legal takeaway that'll serve you well. Riparian rights trump HOA covenants when water quality violations occur. Federal environmental law supersedes all local agreements. That night, I sat in Maggie's workshop, surrounded by her tools and her meticulous documentation, and I finally understood her master plan. She wasn't just protecting our home. She was setting up the ultimate chess move against anyone who tried to destroy our community. Time to checkmate some very surprised bullies. Ever watch one of those heist movies where the hero assembles their crew? That's exactly what the next month felt like. Except instead of robbing a casino, we were going to rob some corrupt HOA board members of their dignity. Sarah recruited 3 environmental law clinic students who were practically salivating at the chance to take on their first federal case. Dr. Chen organized the Willowbrook Lake Conservation Coalition, which grew from our kitchen table meeting to 15 founding members in just 2 weeks. Al connected us with veterans for environmental justice. Turns out, military folks really hate corrupt authorities who abuse power. And Jake, the marina owner, he provided insider knowledge about boat registration violations that made my head spin. Apparently, half the HOA board had been operating unregistered watercraft during their fishing tournaments. The satisfying thunk of thick legal files hitting my kitchen table became the soundtrack of my new life. Sarah's multipronged strategy was beautiful in its simplicity. Attack them from every angle until they couldn't breathe. Federal Clean Water Act complaints against 6 board members for unpermitted dock extensions. State environmental violations for septic system failures and waste dumping. County zoning violations for illegal construction and unpermitted commercial fishing. And the pièce de résistance, a civil RICO investigation request for the coordinated harassment campaign tied to the development company. It's like legal death by 1,000 cuts, Sarah explained, her eyes gleaming with the kind of joy you only see in lawyers who've found the perfect case. Media prep quickly became almost as important as legal strategy. Sarah's journalism contact at the state capital newspaper had been hunting for a solid HOA corruption story. The environmental blogger with 50,000 followers jumped at the grandpa versus polluters angle. And the local TV station's investigative reporter was already tracking luxury development environmental impacts. I practiced my sound bites in Maggie's workshop mirror. They wanted my boat gone so their corruption could continue. Maggie died protecting this lake. I'm just finishing her work. The clean smell of freshly printed evidence photos filled the garage as we organized media packets. Meanwhile, the digital forensics expert from the law clinic was having a field day with the HOA's deleted emails. Amazing how people think hitting delete actually makes evidence disappear. We cross-referenced Maggie's environmental data with county health department reports and found a smoking gun, sewage contamination reports that mysteriously vanished from public records right after Brad's firm started representing the HOA. Our evidence compilation looked like something from a TV crime drama. Security camera footage cataloging trespassing incidents and property damage. Financial analysis tracing money flowing from the developer through Brad's firm to the HOA's harassment operations. Maggie's water quality data proving systematic environmental destruction. But here's what really warmed my heart: the community organizing. Our conservation coalition grew to 45 members, including 3 county commissioners who were getting tired of the development company pressure. Earl's veteran group provided volunteer security for all the harassment targets. The Homeowners Association pledged a legal defense fund for boat owners' rights. The energetic buzz of volunteers making phone calls from my living room reminded me of Maggie's union organizing days. Same passion. Same determination to fight bullies who thought working people were easy targets. Our social media strategy was coordinated truth-telling. Every time Bitsy posted something nasty about property maintenance responsibilities, we responded with documented evidence of her illegal dock and environmental violations. The comment sections became education forums about riparian rights and federal environmental law. Here are the knowledge nuggets that became our weapons. Legal trick 1. Request HOA financial records. They are public documents that often reveal corruption and conflicts of interest. Legal trick 2. Environmental violations trump property covenants. Federal law beats HOA rules every single time. Legal trick 3. Document everything with timestamps. Harassment campaigns create discoverable evidence patterns that prosecutors love. By the end of the month, we had enough evidence to fill 3 bankers' boxes. Maggie's meticulous documentation combined with modern digital forensics and community organizing had created something Bitsy and her cronies never saw coming: accountability. The taste of victory was already sweet in my mouth, stronger than my morning coffee. But I knew the real test was coming. Bitsy wasn't going to go quietly, and neither was the development company that had been paying for this whole operation. One evening, Al stopped by as I was organizing the final evidence packets. "Mitch," he said, settling into Maggie's chair with that satisfied grunt of his, "your wife would be proud. You're not just fighting for your property anymore. You're fighting for the whole community." I looked out at the lake where Maggie's restored Chris Craft bobbed peacefully in our cove, and I could almost hear her chuckling. "Checkmate in 3 moves, Mitch," she'd have said. "Now let's see them wiggle out of this one." Desperate people do desperate things, and Bitsy Caldwell was about as desperate as a trophy wife facing public humiliation can get. It started with Brad showing up at my door personally. First time I'd seen him without his usual lawyer armor of expensive suits and briefcases. He looked like a man who'd been losing sleep, which frankly gave me a warm, fuzzy feeling. "Mr. Thornfield," he said, shifting his weight like a kid caught stealing cookies, "my client has authorized me to offer you $200,000 cash for immediate property sale. 20 grand for a property worth $800,000 minimum." The insult was almost refreshing in its transparency. He claimed his developer client needed a quick purchase for environmental remediation. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. They were offering to buy my land to fix the environmental damage they'd caused. When I politely declined, "Okay," maybe I laughed in his face a little. His tone shifted fast. Suddenly, he was concerned about my mental capacity and suggesting I might be unsafe living alone. He brought along 2 concerned neighbors I'd never seen before, who would apparently testify about my declining condition. The sticky feeling of the hidden recording device tape against my skin was worth every bit of discomfort. Thank God for one-party consent laws. But the real offensive started the next week. The HOA newsletter featured a charming article about property maintenance responsibilities for aging residents. Anonymous flyers appeared overnight claiming my septic system was contaminating the lake, rich, considering their McMansions were the actual source of pollution. Bitsy organized something called the Neighborhood Safety Committee, which was basically a roving band of busybodies targeting elderly residents' homes for wellness concerns. The county started receiving multiple wellness check requests for my address from concerned citizens who couldn't spell my name correctly. The acrid smell of algae bloom washing up on shore served as a daily reminder of who was really poisoning our lake. But facts weren't slowing down their smear campaign. Here's where wearing a wire during Brad's bribery visit paid off beautifully. The recording proved coordination with the developer and captured his threats against other elderly residents. Sarah filed a preliminary injunction preventing any forced competency evaluation, and suddenly Brad wasn't quite so confident about my mental state. Meanwhile, Dr. Chen's expanded water testing was providing dramatic evidence of environmental destruction, fecal coliform levels 300% above safe standards, with source tracking proving contamination originated from the luxury development area. When a fish kill event happened upstream, complete with photos of dead bass floating belly up, we had our visual smoking gun. Media attention was building like a snowball rolling downhill. The investigative reporter's preliminary story generated over 500 angry comments about HOA abuse. The environmental blogger's post got shared 2,000 times with a #JusticeForMitch hashtag trending locally. State legislators' offices were getting constituent calls demanding HOA reform. The developer's stock price dropped 3% after environmental violation rumors started circulating. Amazing how quickly money talks when bad publicity starts walking. Our allies mobilized like a well-oiled machine. Earl's veteran group established 24/7 volunteer security rotations for all targeted elderly residents. The Homeowners Association filed an amicus brief supporting boat owners' riparian rights. County commissioners scheduled an emergency hearing on HOA overreach complaints. The law clinic students were practically vibrating with excitement as they prepared a federal civil rights complaint for age discrimination. "This is textbook violation of Fair Housing Act protections," one of them told me, eyes bright with righteous fury. The satisfying sound of phone notifications with media interview requests became my new alarm clock. Every ping meant another journalist wanting to hear about the HOA from hell. But my favorite moment came when Officer Martinez called to inform me that Brad's concerned neighbor witnesses had criminal records for fraud. Turns out hiring fake witnesses to question someone's mental capacity isn't exactly looked upon kindly by law enforcement. The metallic taste of adrenaline during each confrontation was becoming addictive. For the first time since Maggie died, I felt truly alive. These bullies had awakened something in me that 40 years of environmental law had only hinted at, the pure joy of fighting corruption and winning. That night, I sat on my dock, listening to the gentle lap of water against Maggie's restored hull, watching the lights from illegal docks reflect off the contaminated water, and I smiled. They'd escalated from harassment to bribery to character assassination. Time for me to escalate to total destruction. You know what they say about cornered animals? They bite. And Bitsy Caldwell was about as cornered as a California trophy wife could get without actually being in a cage. Her final play was so desperate it was almost beautiful. At 4 a.m. on a Tuesday, my security cameras caught her teenage nephew creeping around my dock with a motor oil container, dumping the contents directly into the lake near my boat. The oily rainbow sheen on the water caught the morning light like some twisted art installation. By 8 a.m., the HOA had reported environmental contamination originating from my property to the county environmental office. The same county officer who'd been manipulated before showed up with a citation, ready to find the planted evidence that would finally give them grounds to seize my property. The nervous flutter in my stomach lasted about 30 seconds until I showed him the security footage of Bits's nephew playing environmental terrorist in the dead of night. "Sir," Officer Johnson said, his face flushing red with embarrassment, "I owe you an apology. Someone's been playing me for a fool. You think. But I was gracious about it. No point in making enemies of the people who'd be enforcing environmental violations against the real criminals." Meanwhile, Brad was ramping up the pressure with threats of immediate property seizure, citing ongoing environmental hazards. The irony was so thick you could swim in it. They were trying to steal my land for dumping motor oil they themselves had dumped. But that was just the tip of their desperation. The HOA called an emergency meeting to declare my property a community nuisance. Scheduled for the very next evening, the plan was to vote on immediate legal action to remove my boat and demolish my dock. Bitsy circulated a petition demanding the county force a property sale to protect the lake ecosystem. The same lake they'd been systematically poisoning for 3 years. The same lake where their illegal docks jutted into state waters like concrete middle fingers. And guess who showed up at that HOA meeting as concerned environmental consultants? Representatives from Lakeshore Luxury Resorts, the development company bankrolling this entire operation. They'd stopped pretending this was about neighborhood standards. This was a corporate land grab, pure and simple. But while they were busy setting up their final power play, Sarah and I were putting the finishing touches on our nuclear option. The state environmental investigation had concluded that the luxury development caused all the lake contamination. The federal EPA opened a criminal investigation based on my Clean Water Act complaint. The county prosecutor was reviewing Brad's bribery recordings and seriously considering charges. Our forensic accountant confirmed the developer funneled $150,000 through Brad's firm to fund the harassment campaign. Every threatening letter, every fake violation, every incident of property damage paid for by corporate money. 200 residents signed our petition supporting me and demanding the board's resignations. 3 county commissioners publicly condemned the HOA's harassment tactics. Environmental groups from across the state were planning a lakefront rally with me as the featured speaker. I'll organize an honor guard escort for all elderly harassment victims, 23 veterans in full-dress uniforms, ready to stand between bullies and their targets. The weight of their support felt heavier than Maggie's toolbox and twice as satisfying. The final setup was perfect. The HOA scheduled their public emergency meeting to vote on property seizure, inviting developer representatives and county officials to witness their community action. Media confirmed attendance, a TV news crew, a newspaper reporter, and the environmental blogger with 50,000 followers. Bitsy thought she was orchestrating my public humiliation. She had no idea she was setting up her own execution. I spent the day before the meeting organizing my evidence folder, every document, every photograph, every recording that would destroy them in front of God, the county, and the 6 o'clock news. The satisfying weight of that thick folder in my hands felt like holding justice itself. Maggie's final note was tucked in the front. Fight for what's right. Help your neighbors and never let bullies win. Sarah called that evening with the final piece of our puzzle. Mitch, she said, barely containing her excitement. The EPA confirmed criminal charges against 6 board members. Federal marshals will be present tomorrow night for potential arrests. I sat on my dock one last time before the storm, watching Maggie's Chris bob peacefully in our cove, listening to the gentle lap of water that would soon be clean again. The nervous energy was gone, replaced by the calm certainty of someone holding 4 aces. Tomorrow, Bitsy Caldwell would learn what happens when you mess with a union electrician's widower who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The Willowbrook Community Center had never seen anything like it. 150 residents packed into a space designed for maybe 7 to 5, with TV cameras, newspaper reporters, and enough tension to power the building. The electric energy of the crowd buzzed like Maggie's old power tools warming up. Bitsy presided from behind the folding table they'd set up as a makeshift podium, banging her gavel like she was conducting the New York Philharmonic instead of a suburban HOA meeting. The developer representatives sat in the front row, wearing identical navy suits and identical expressions of smug confidence. County Environmental Officer Johnson was there as an observer, along with Prosecutor Williams and 2 federal marshals tucked in the back corner, trying to blend in like 6-foot men in suits blending into a crowd of angry retirees. I entered with my entourage, Sarah in her sharp courtroom blazer, Dr. Chen carrying a folder bursting with environmental data, Earl leading 23 veterans in dress uniforms, and Jake representing the Homeowners Association. We looked like the world's most dangerous book club. Bitsy launched into her final performance, presenting what she called a comprehensive environmental report proving my property threatened the entire lake ecosystem. She'd hired some consultant with impressive credentials to testify that my boat posed an imminent danger to water quality. The irony was so perfect it was almost poetry. A woman whose illegal dock leaked sewage directly into the lake, claiming my properly maintained boat was the environmental threat. The board has no choice, Bitsy announced with theatrical gravity, but to authorize immediate legal action for property seizure and environmental remediation. The developer representative stood up on cue, offering to purchase my property for immediate environmental restoration at above market value. Translation: they'd pay me what they wanted, and then build their luxury resort where my home had stood for 35 years. The board voted 4-1 to proceed with forced sale proceedings. The lone dissent came from Mrs. Patterson, bless her heart, who'd been enduring the same harassment campaign. Then, Bitsy made her fatal mistake. Before we proceed, does the property owner have any final statement before vacating his family's home? The sweet taste of anticipated victory was stronger than my morning coffee as I stood up. Actually, yes, I do have a few things to say. I walked to the microphone carrying Maggie's thick evidence folder and looked out at the sea of faces, some hostile, some supportive, all about to witness the biggest MIC drop moment in Willowbrook HOA history. First, I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight to witness this important community discussion. It's always fascinating to see democracy in action. Bitsy's smile faltered. She sensed something was coming but couldn't guess what. Before you vote to steal my home, I continued, opening the folder, I thought you might be interested in some documents I found among my late wife's papers. I held up the water rights certificate. This shows that I actually own the water rights to 12 acres of this lake, including the very area where the HOA has been charging fishing fees for the last 5 years. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Bits's face went pale. But that's not the best part. I pulled out Maggie's environmental documentation. My wife spent 3 years documenting illegal septic runoff from luxury development, complete with water quality tests proving contamination started exactly when construction began. Dr. Chen stood and confirmed the scientific evidence. Officer Johnson nodded grimly. The developer representative suddenly looked very interested in his shoes. "Here's my personal favorite," I said, pulling out the digital recorder. I played the recording. Brad's voice filled the room, clear as a bell, offering bribes and making threats against an elderly widower. The crowd erupted. People stood, shouting questions, demanding answers. 3 board members tried to slip out the back door but found their path blocked by federal marshals. "Oh, and one more thing," I said as the noise died down. "The EPA has confirmed criminal charges against 6 board members. Federal marshals are here tonight for potential arrests." County Prosecutor Williams stood. "Mrs. Caldwell, Mr. Caldwell, you are under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, and federal environmental crimes." The room exploded into chaos. Residents demanded board resignations. Media swarmed, interviewing anyone with an opinion. Developer representatives fled like rats from a sinking ship. But the moment that made everything worthwhile was watching Bitsy being led away in handcuffs, finally silent for the first time since this whole mess began. "Maggie," I whispered, clutching her evidence folder. "Checkmate." 6 months later, I'm sitting on my dock at sunrise, coffee steaming in the crisp spring air, watching Maggie's Chris bob peacefully in water that's finally clean again. The morning mist rises from the lake like nature's own victory celebration. And for the first time since Maggie died, everything feels right with the world. The aftermath was swift and satisfying. 3 HOA board members resigned during that chaotic meeting. Bitsy fled through the back exit in handcuffs. The Caldwells moved back to California after filing for bankruptcy. Brad's law license was suspended pending an ethics investigation, and their McMansion sold for half what they paid. Sometimes karma doesn't just knock, it kicks the door down. The new HOA board includes 3 elderly residents and 2 environmental advocates. Harassment ceased immediately, property value stabilized, and the luxury development was cancelled after environmental impact reviews. Amazing how quickly developers lose interest when federal regulators start asking hard questions about sewage disposal. But the real victory is what we built together. The Maggie Thornfield Memorial Lake Conservation Fund, started with $125,000 from settlement money, now provides annual environmental monitoring to prevent future contamination. The fund ensures our grandchildren will inherit clean water, not corporate pollution. UL's Veterans for Environmental Justice expanded to 3 neighboring counties, helping elderly residents fight HOA harassment and corporate bullying. Turns out military folks don't much appreciate seeing their neighbors terrorized by petty tyrants with clipboards and attitudes. The county passed the Elderly Residents Protection Act, specifically preventing HOA age discrimination and requiring financial disclosure for board members. 3 other states are considering similar legislation. Sometimes one small fight creates ripples that change everything. Personal healing came in unexpected ways. I completed Maggie's boat restoration, christening it just as served with a bottle of champagne ale provided from his Navy days. The satisfying splash of breaking glass against the hull felt like a benediction. Now, I teach boat maintenance workshops at the community center using Maggie's tools, sharing her knowledge with a new generation of lake lovers. There's something deeply satisfying about watching teenage hands learn to use a socket wrench the way Maggie taught me. Her legacy lives on in every properly tightened bolt and every successfully patched hole. I've discovered I enjoy environmental activism just as much as Maggie did. Dr. Chen and I work together monitoring water quality, and I mentor other elderly residents facing HOA harassment through the legal clinic. Turns out, fighting corruption is addictive when you're good at it. Here's your final knowledge nugget. HOA financial records must be auditable. Demand forensic accounting for suspicious expenses because sunshine really is the best disinfectant for corruption. Willowbrook Lake is now a designated environmental protection area. We even host an annual Respect Your Elders festival celebrating senior residents' community contributions. Last year, we raised $50,000 for environmental law scholarships in Maggie's name. But my favorite legacy? The phone call I got last week from an elderly veteran in the next county. "Sir," he said, "I heard you know how to fight these HOA bullies. My neighbor says they can't make me remove my American flag, but they're threatening daily fines." Sounds like our next story. HOA tried to steal my American flag. They didn't know I was a decorated Marine. As I finished my coffee this morning, I opened Maggie's old tackle box sitting beside me on the dock. Inside, beneath her favorite lures, was her final note. "Mitch, fight for what's right. Help your neighbors and never let bullies win. Love always, M." I smiled, casting her favorite lure into our lake, clean, protected, and free from corporate corruption. The gentle splash sounded like applause from heaven. Maggie would be proud. We didn't just save our home, we saved our community. Now, it's your turn. Drop a comment about your worst HOA nightmare. Let's support each other in the fight against petty tyrants who think they can push around good people. Share your stories. Learn from each other. And remember, bullies only win when good folks stay silent. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens when they mess with the wrong decorated veteran next week. Trust me, that flag story is going to make this boat battle look like a warm-up. Until then, fight the good fight, and never let the bullies win.